Hello and welcome back to the Tracy Developer Meetup. So this is our October edition, and I'm with David Neal, who's going to be talking about Electron development. But before we do, let's go over some logistics stuff when it comes to the meetup. So the same kind of spiel every month. So this is live on Twitch. So please engage with us in the chat. I'll be proctoring the chat. If I need to stop David at any time, I'll stop him and ask him any questions that you ask, just in case he's not looking at the chat himself, which is fine. If there's any kind of audio or video problems, stop me for those too, because I want to be able to correct them. And yes, I'm looking at the chat right now. David has the clearest camera that I've ever seen. I told him pretty much the same thing before we went live, so he's got a really good setup. Very impressive. 8K, maybe, I don't know. I guess
No.
I'll go over some more logistical stuff at the end, but I mean, David, what do you think? How are you doing today? You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here, and um, thank you for inviting me on to your meetup. And yeah, I'm in North Georgia, so 3 hours on the East Coast difference. No problem there. And as you can see, I have a beard, and I drink a lot of caffeine, and I eat a lot of bacon, and I play guitars. You know, a little bit of everything, I guess.
Awesome, man. So not only are you doing caffeine and guitars and being a beard guy, but you are also an extremely talented artist, right?
Well, thank you. Um, I I try to draw, and sometimes it works out.
I think it works out pretty well. I've seen the work that you've done. I've even hired you to draw me an avatar at one point in time. I think it's really awesome stuff, and I will plug your site throughout this stream. But you wanna tell us about what we're doing tonight?
Yeah, we're talking about Electron, building desktop apps with Electron. Why would we want to do that? And how would you do that?
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's jump right into it. I've switched over to your screen, so your screen is visible now to everyone.
All right, cool. Well, let me make sure I got the right focus on the slides. Hey, y'all. As I said before, I am from the North Georgia area. I grew up in Georgia. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for about 20 years. I'm back in Georgia again. So I speak fluent redneck, and I also speak guitar and all those kinds of things. And I'm excited to be here. I'm glad to have this opportunity to meet with y'all and talk about Electron. We're going to cover what is Electron, what kind of stuff is it capable of doing, and all that. Why do we even want to consider building desktop applications in this web and mobile first world that we live in today? I'm going to give you a crash course on getting started with Electron and give you some tips on some things you should know about when building apps with Electron based on a bunch of apps that I've created. So let's dive into it, and we'll start with my story. So my story is I used to be a super duper .NET developer. For years and years, I was on the Microsoft stack of technologies, going back to basic, quick basic on DOS and Visual Basic on Windows and all that kind of fun stuff. And at the time that I was building some desktop, so first of all, I've been a web developer since the late '90s, so I don't know anything about building desktop apps in the .NET world. Um, my desktop days ended when I switched from Visual Basic to uh, active server pages back in the day. So when I was faced with the need to build some desktop tools, I thought, well, and I needed to be able to support more than just Windows. I needed to be able to deploy at least to Mac, and Linux would be nice too. I thought, well, our mobile team at the company that I was working at was having great success with Xamarin, building cross-platform mobile apps for iOS and Android. I thought, well, hey, I can use my mad.NET skills with Xamarin and be able to create Mac and Linux apps as well. So what I found was, hey, yeah, I can write some code and I can share this code across these different platforms. But that's kind of where the benefits ended. The So Xamarin Mac for building desktop apps does not get the same amount of love that Xamarin iOS and Android does. There's not that many people who are trying to do this thing as there are, people who care about mobile. Native UI is hard because there's no tooling in Xamarin itself to, give you a kind of a universal experience to go against, or at least at the time. And so I didn't know how to do UI for Windows, at least that wasn't like some ugly gray screen with a big button on it. And on the Mac, you had to learn Xcode UI Builder, and on Linux, it was like, God help you. Here's a library. Good luck. Deployment is also really hard under .NET and Mono and Xamarin. So it was, really things are pretty solid on Windows, but when you go outside the Windows ecosystem, managing installs and creating those installers and how to deal with the Mono runtime and all that stuff was really difficult to do. And at the time, this was before Microsoft had acquired Xamarin. So the licensing was a deal breaker. I was just creating some utilities that my customers needed at the company that I was at. We weren't going to be making any money on these apps. We just wanted to be able to give people an easy way to manage some things and have some utilities. So my experience with going the Xamarin route ended with a lot of frustration. Well, I heard about this thing called Electron, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take a little time and see if I can figure this out and see if it helps. And the pros I found were, hey, Electron is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Those are things I know. Those are things I understand as a web developer, and I can make things look nice for web pages. I can probably create a good-looking interface for a desktop app too. Electron is essentially the Node.js runtime paired with the Chromium view engine from Chrome. So, anything that you can do with Node, anything you can do with, as far as, the browser goes, that you're probably comfortable with designing stuff for Chrome, hey, this is a great combination. And there are no deployment dependencies. When you create an Electron application, it can run standalone. You don't already have to have some version of Chrome installed. You don't have to have Node.js installed on the desktop that you want to put your application on. And it can run independently if those things, exist on that person's computer. I found that Electron was pretty daggum awesome in what I was able to do coming at it from a web developer standpoint. Plus, I had the benefits of being able to use the latest and greatest JavaScript that's available for Node.js and the Chrome V8 JavaScript engine. So I didn't have to do any transpilation or use Babel or any of those kinds of tooling to be able to use modern JavaScript. I could just write JavaScript that I wanted to, and it would work. Okay, there are some drawbacks to using Electron. And the biggest one that I can offer is that it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Wah, wah, wah. Yeah, if you're not if you're not a web developer and you're not already comfortable, building web interfaces, yeah, it could be a little bit of a challenge. If you don't like JavaScript, Electron's not going to help you to like JavaScript any more than you already do. Okay, so that's it. The history of Electron. It was created by GitHub for the Atom editor. Again, this was, wow, GitHub is now owned by Microsoft. This was before Microsoft. So GitHub created this editor called Atom, and they created this framework for running the Atom editor using Node.js and Chromium. Really cool technology. And they called it initially the Atom shell, and they realized, hey, we could use this technology to do a lot more things than just building an editor. So they renamed it to Electron to avoid confusion with that it's not an Atom thing. It's a tool that anybody can use. Development out in the wild outside of GitHub has been active since 2013, so it's been around a while. It didn't hit 1.0 until 2016. Another huge milestone is in December of 2019. Electron joined the OpenJS Foundation, and that just means that no one company, including Microsoft, is the owner of the source code and the maintenance and the life of the Electron application. Is going to continue to live on regardless of any single entity. Same with like Node.js, right? And other really important JavaScript frameworks. And then to give you an idea, September 2020, it's up to version 10. They've been regularly adding more features and new capabilities and keeping up with the latest versions of Node.js and Chromium, and it's pretty daggum solid. So some of the features that are built into Electron are things like rapid development. You can, as I'll show you here in a little while, when we dig into building your first Electron application, you can just throw in some HTML and some JavaScript, and you're off to the races. You can build desktop apps really fast. There are native UX features in Electron that take advantage of whatever operating system you're on. Things like native file open and save and print, and notifications, tray notifications. All these are built into the API in a OS agnostic way that allows you to add that kind of experience to your apps really easily and quickly. Deployments and silent updates is built right into the framework. So being able to, if you've used a desktop app that's based on Electron, you might see a notification that says, hey, there's a new update available. Would you like to restart and, apply the latest changes? That's kind of built into the app and that you can take advantage of. And there's other tools out there that take that even further and make it even easier. Native UX, like I mentioned, for all those kinds of dialogues and things. You can share, likely if you already have a web application, you can share some code and maybe some UI from your web app or your mobile app and use that in your Electron application. Since it is CSS and HTML, it makes it really easy to create themes or rebranded versions of your application. A lot of folks like to, have a light theme or a dark theme, and you can easily do that just by swapping out some CSS. No big deal.
David, I have a question.
Yeah.
In regards to the silent updates, are Electron apps currently allowed in the Apple Mac Store?
Yes. I don't know the full details. I don't have any apps myself in the
Sure.
App Store, but there are libraries built into the application that can do things like in-app purchases and other things that are required or needed to participate in the like the App Store ecosystem of either
Got it.
Apple or Windows. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks.
So, um, Electron is agnostic to whatever JavaScript frameworks you want to use. You can use your favorite tool of choice if you want to use Vue or React or Angular, or maybe you don't want to use a framework at all. You can do that. There's no shame in using jQuery. I built a couple of Electron applications that just use a good CSS framework and jQuery, and that's really all I needed. I didn't need something like React or Vue would have just been overkill because I'm just showing a few pages and wiring up a few click events and things like that. So why do we want to build a desktop application? You know, everything's gone mobile, everything's on the web. Why do you want to build a desktop app? Well, there are still some scenarios where it makes sense to build a desktop app. If your application needs to live offline, disconnected from the internet, maybe you got data entry type things where you go out in the field and there's no um, there's no cell service in those areas, so you got to be able to work offline and come back and synchronize. Maybe you have a need to use local printers or hardware devices or other local hardware that you just don't have drivers for those kinds of things on a mobile app or a tablet or something like that. Maybe you need software to run on premises at a client location. This was my use case. I needed to be able to create utilities that could live in a customer's network. They weren't going to open up their firewall and allow me to reach in and grab some data and that kind of thing. So I needed to give them an application that they could run locally that would talk to my company's APIs and be able to submit and synchronize information with our system. There's internal and line of business applications. Maybe you need to be able to edit local files. And as um, mentioned before, maybe you want to take advantage of the App Store and monetize your application. Another scenario may be kiosk. So you've got a retail application you want to run and only be where they interact with that one screen and they can't do anything else outside of that application. That there's a kiosk mode built into Electron so that you can do that. Sometimes deploying a desktop application is so much easier than an intranet application. I don't know if you've worked in big companies where there's a whole lot of red tape and restrictions on what gets deployed to web apps, to their websites. But maybe you just have a couple of folks who need a utility that you can create for them, and it would be a whole lot easier just to stick it on a thumb drive and say, "Here, run this app," and you can do it without having to be a a technical geek and run like a command line app or something like that. Sometimes it just feels right, like a mail app, a good mail application, or a good say you want a database client. you're not going to have a database client either on your phone or um, it as a again it's some because of security and all that stuff. It's something that's got to be running on premises with your database. So a good desktop app kind of makes sense in those scenarios. Here's a whole bunch of desktop app ideas. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but the idea is there are still a lot of desktop apps out there today, and if you think about it, you use desktop apps all the time. Some cases it still makes sense. So we talked about how Electron was initially created to support Atom, and Atom was a very successful editor when it was first launched. So some people switched from Sublime or WebStorm or some other editor that they may have been using and started enjoying using Atom. When I discovered that Slack was an Electron application, this was one of those apps that I'm like, oh wow, really? That's what piqued my interest as to, especially when I discovered that Slack was essentially a React application running on the desktop. That's pretty cool. Of course, Slack has gotten a bad rap over the years for using up a whole lot of memory and resources. That's not necessarily an Electron problem. I mean, yeah, it kind of is, but there's other applications out there that run great as Electron applications. One of those is Visual Studio Code. This is the one that really got people to notice. When I heard about Visual Studio Code, my first thought was, wow, how did they pull that off? Because I tried to build an app in Xamarin because I just made the assumption that if it's coming from Microsoft, it's got to be .NET. And lo and behold, Visual Studio Code is an Electron application running Chrome or Chromium and Node.js, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Wow, that's quite a departure for Microsoft. And in hindsight, it's like Microsoft's acquired GitHub. Microsoft's now kind of owns Electron. That's kind of cool. Anyway, Postman is another example of an Electron application. If you do anything with APIs, Postman's a fan for dealing with APIs. Of course, GitHub went and used Electron to do other things, including the GitHub desktop client. That is an Electron application. There's lots and lots of great examples of Electron apps. One of the resources that I point you to in the end includes a huge list of the known apps that are out there that have been created with Electron. All right, so here we go. How to Electron in a nutshell. So if you want to try out Electron, here's what you need to do. You'll need some version of Node.js. I recommend the latest stable version, which is right now version 12, the LTS. And you'll need to go to the Node.js website and click the big green install button. Chances are you may already have Node.js installed on your system. It's become really popular, especially NPM for managing dependencies. You'll need a project folder. Sounds reasonable enough, right? Create a folder for your project. And then from the command line, there's a couple of commands you need to run. The first one is npm init, which is going to initialize your project and create a package JSON file in that folder. And then you're going to install Electron, npm install Electron. And then you're going to need to do like a hello world application. You're going to need a JavaScript file. Doesn't have to be called main.js, but that's typical for an Electron application is to name it main.js. And you need a HTML file. That's it. You can create your hello world application, and you can do a lot of powerful things with just this setup. I want to give you some vocabulary so that you can understand the Electron world. So in Electron, the application lifecycle of an Electron application, it begins as a Node.js app. Node.js is just a command line application. All Node does is execute JavaScript. It is the Chrome V8 engine that, along with some additional libraries for networking and file systems and that kind of thing. But it's basically just its life is to execute JavaScript. So Electron starts as a Node.js process, and this is called either process or the main process. So in the documentation of Electron, a lot of times this is referred to as main, the main process. After the main process loads up, then your code is going to bootstrap and create a renderer. And this is an instance of Chromium that is going to render your HTML file, and that'll be your desktop window. You can have actually more than one window. You can show and hide windows so that maybe you're only showing one window at a time, or you can have multiple windows and support a multi-monitor situation, or briefly just show an editor or a settings dialog or settings page and show and hide that kind of stuff. So you got a lot of flexibility as far as the windows that you can create that users can interact with. Your main.js file, at least to begin with, is going to look a lot like this. And I'll step through what this is doing. So in the world of Node.js, you use require to pull in your library that you want to use, kind of like your using or import statement, out of that Electron library, the app and the browser window. And then we have this useful when ready function that returns a promise. And this is kind of like in the world of like jQuery, if you have a document ready event, letting you know that the app, the page is finished rendering. Well, the app when ready is like the Node.js main process has finished doing everything that it needs to do, and it's now ready for you to take over and direct the application from this point forward. So we wait for the when ready to be done. We can create a new browser window instance. This is the renderer, and we can set things like the width and the height of that window. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are tons and tons of properties that we can set on this browser window, such as the position of the window, the minimum and maximum height and width. We can turn resizability on and off, or move, make it unmovable. We can turn on that kiosk mode where it takes over the entire screen. There's tons of other properties. We have this cool thing called node integration, which I'll talk more about that in a moment. But this is essentially saying for this browser window, it's also going to have Node.js enabled. And then last, we're going to load up our HTML file, our local file, and render that in the window. Your Hello World HTML file can be as simple as an HTML document with a title. And then from the command line, you go and type in the command npx electron main.js. So npx is part of the Node.js install, and it says just run this module and run it with this parameter of or argument of main.js. And when you do that, it's going to fire up your Hello World desktop application. And you can notice that whatever text you assign in the title of that HTML page becomes the title of the window, and whatever content you put in the body is going to be rendered in the contents of that window. So you can start to get as fancy as you want, adding CSS, creating buttons, or bringing in a CSS library that makes it look more like native to whatever operating system you're using. Let's go back to this code. I want to talk about this web preferences node integration true. Used to, this was always on by default. Now it's like a setting that you have to set when you create the browser window. But this is the heart of what makes Electron so amazing. When I first started using Electron, I made this assumption that, oh, well, it's using Node, it's using Chromium. It must be creating some kind of local web server for it to talk to and be able to do like API stuff back and forth. That's not the case. So it actually marries Node.js with Chrome so that you can do anything that you would normally do with Node. You can do it straight from your browser or your renderer, as it's called in Electron. And to give you an example, if we take the body of our Hello World application and we add some div tags like the info and the home list and a script tag, we can add to this script tag whatever JavaScript we want. And we can reference an external JavaScript file too. It doesn't have to be embedded in the HTML. But for this, just to show you what you can do, I'm putting it inside the script tag in the HTML.
We have a question coming in the chat, David.
Okay.
So Crutchcorn in the chat is asking, do you still access the typical window and document APIs that you'd expect from Chrome? And then, for example, if I change document.title, will it update the app's title bar?
That is actually, as far as I know, I haven't personally needed to change like the window title while the application was running. But my assumption would be you just need to update the HTML, and that's automatically going to, under the hood, it's going to call whatever OS specific APIs are needed to change the window title. So you never have to worry about what OS you're running on, whether it be Windows or Mac or Linux. It's going to handle those kinds of things for you so that you can focus on one API and one way of building things across all the platforms.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Answer? Yeah.
I'm not sure yet, but if there's a follow-up, I'll definitely stop you.
Okay. Cool. So in this code that I've added to the script tag, I've got these statements like process.versions.node and things like that. This is not your standard web JavaScript. This is Node.js. This is process is part of the Node.js library where you can access a lot of information about the environment that your application is running in. And Electron has extended the Node.js runtime to include a lot more things that are helpful for building desktop apps. So I can reference the versions of the components of the system that we're running on. And I can do things like require in dependencies from Node.js. So anything that I can do with Node, and that there's built-in libraries like the file system library that this example uses, or I could pull in a library I download and install using npm, such as some fancy database client or something like that, and I can require that in directly into the web application, so to speak. And in this case, I'm going to require in file system. I'm going to read a directory for files, and this is one of those nice little shortcuts that Electron has extended Node with, and that is you can access the home directory of the current user in a platform agnostic way. So on Windows, it's going to give you the right documents folder. On Mac, it's going to give you the right home folder. And on Linux, it'll give you, the same kind of thing. So we can enumerate over those entries. And of course, you can see I'm using modern JavaScript syntax like the fat arrow syntax and all that kind of stuff. I can even use async and await if I wanted to do that. So when I run this application, I get hello world and the version of Node and Electron and Chrome or Chromium that's running, and a list of all the folders that are in my home folder on my system. This is really powerful and really cool. You can do with your Electron application. And whatever things that the current user has access to, like their documents and desktop and other apps, be able to execute other applications, that's all available too. You can, just as if you were building a native desktop application, you can do all those things with Electron. And you can do them using the Electron APIs so that you don't have to think about, well, how do I have to do this on Windows, or how do I do this same kind of thing on Mac or Linux? It's all there so you can use it. One little tip that I'll go ahead and give you now. This is really neat because we're running in Chrome. We have at our disposal the Chrome Dev Tools. So you can, when you launch your application, especially while you're developing it, you can open up the Dev Tools, and you have the option of either being married to the current window or detached from the current window, so that when your application launches, you can use the same kind of dev tools you may already be familiar with in Chrome. You can make breakpoints. You can step through your JavaScript code. You can inspect any of the HTML elements that are in the window. All kinds of, anything and everything that you would normally do with Chrome. Pretty powerful stuff. Okay, let's pause for a moment. There are two hard problems in software development. You may have heard this, right? There's cache invalidation, there's naming things, and there's off by one errors. Well, I submit to you that there are actually 4 hard problems. I don't know what your development environment's like, but in the teams that I've been on, one of the most important things or aspects or activity of any kind of development work is going to involve choosing the perfect animated GIF. You're submitting a pull request, or you're submitting a comment on someone else's pull request, or you want to give your coworkers a hard time in Slack over some ridiculous code that they've created. You need the best animated GIF to express how you feel about your coworker's code, right? So I created an Electron application to solve this problem, and I call it Giffer. So in Giffer, you can search for an animated GIF. And if you mouse over any of the graphics, it's going to give you a preview. And so this one's pretty good, but I don't think it quite captures how I really feel about this code that I'm reviewing. And so Spock comes over, smashes the computer. I think this one works. So I've got a nice little button there that I can copy that to the clipboard, and then I can go and paste that into Slack or the pull request or wherever I need to use this animated GIF. And, this is probably the most important application I have ever created in my career so far. You're welcome. You can go find it on my GitHub under Reverent Geek. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. Remember how I told you about how Electron has this main process and then you have one or more renderers? Well, there are some built-in modules that are available to the process, some that are available to the renderers, and some that are available to both. And I want to cover some of those modules with you now. So in the main process, we have modules like the app module that we've already seen. And this allows us to manage our application lifecycle events. We can process things like command line arguments. We can get information about the current system and the user, like paths to specific folders. We can launch renderers and that kind of thing. There's IPC main, which is IPC stands for Inter-Process Communications. So the main process and the renderers, they live separate from each other. So we need a way to communicate back and forth between those things. And IPC is kind of like a pub sub, publish subscribe type of event system where we can create channels that we can listen on and publish messages to, so that we can get information back and forth. There's dialogue, which is a native dialogue that's going, depending on which operating system you're on, it can do things like the file open and save dialogues, info and error messages, the printer dialogues, all those system native things you can access through this one API. There's also an OS agnostic way of creating menus and menu items so that your menus look correct on Windows and Mac and Linux. There's a screen module which will allow you to not only determine the current screen size and resolution, but also enumerate all the displays that are connected to the computer so that you can know that there's multiple monitors and be able to take advantage of multiple monitors. You can also determine like the cursor location. And then there's another module called the power monitor that allows you to monitor power state changes. So like if there's a video playing and you don't want the computer to go to sleep, you can control that. Or if someone is closing the lid on their laptop, you'll get a notification so that you can, like gracefully shut down some of the, disconnect from network servers or close files and, those kinds of things that would be, being a good steward of the resources and things that you may have open connections to on the desktop. And there's lots and lots more of modules that are available. I'm just hitting some of the highlights and some of the ones you may be most interested in. There's a tray module that allows you to access the tray or the dock on the current operating system and do like tray notifications. And then on the renderer side, your desktop window, you got things like IPC renderer, which is the correspondent inter-process communications where you can send messages back to the main process or listen for messages from the main process. There is a module called remote, which is just a fancy wrapper around the whole IPC thing so that you can say, go do this thing on the main process. There is a special module called WebFrame that's kind of like using an iframe in your web page, but this allows you to be very specific about what kind of security or access that this content has. So for the most part, you're going to want to only use your own HTML files that you've developed yourself. But if you need to bring in content, external content, like from the internet, somebody wants to use your app to search for something that's on the internet, or render some content that's provided from one of your web servers, use a web frame for that so that you can lock down that content so that it can't do anything outside of that frame. Because otherwise, if you've got node integration turned on and all those kinds of things, which are great features, it's bringing in arbitrary content from the internet could be a bad thing. You want to, keep track of your security. And then there are some modules that are available to both the main process and the renderer, and that's things like the clipboard, so that you can put content onto the clipboard or get content off of the clipboard. There's a built-in crash reporter, which is pretty cool. There's a native image module that allows you to deal with different icon sizes, resolutions, DPIs. And then there's a shell, which allows you to basically shell out to some other application that's on the computer, like launch the default application for a PDF, or run this command line application in the background. You don't have to, doesn't have to be something that's visible to the user. You can also use shell to like move files to the trash or something like that. All right, deploying Electron applications. There's kind of 3 levels to deploying an Electron application. The first is you can just take the Electron binaries that are provided when you install it, and along with your HTML and CSS and JavaScript, whatever you create that runs with Electron, and you can just take those files and copy them to a thumb drive and give that to someone else and say, give them a few instructions on how to copy those files to the desktop and, run an executable, and they've got your application. There's no dependencies or any special things that have to be installed. It'll just work as long as you're giving them the binaries for their operating system. So you can get the binaries, the binaries for Mac and Windows and Linux, and do this kind of scenario. The next step is to use something called Electron Packager, and that's going to take your code along with the binaries and create a standalone app file or an exe file for Windows that's going to run your application. So now instead of, you just got a nice bundle for your application that you can give to someone. And then to take that a step further, there's something called the Electron Builder that'll take the output from the Electron install. What was the previous one? The Electron Packager. It'll take the output from the Packager and make a native installer for Windows and Mac and Linux. And then if you use a system like Electron Updater, which allows you to easily publish apps and packages through like npm or your own server, you can add those features really easily to be able to update your application as it's running out there on desktop applications.
We have a question coming in from JW Intern. So the question is, do you need an OS X computer or Windows computer to build binaries from a Linux computer, for instance?
yes and no. So the first scenario that I described, where you're using the binaries that are provided by the Electron project, if you go that route, then you don't have to have any of those other operating systems. You can just take their binaries, combine it with your files, and give that to someone. But if you want to actually build a standalone executable, then you're going to want to have access to those other operating systems, especially if you want to use to create an installer. The easiest scenario is to have a Mac, and then a Mac can, just like when building mobile applications, you kind of have to have a Mac or access to a Mac to be able to build iOS apps. Same kind of thing with desktop apps. There's ways around it, right? That I I profess not to know anything about those other options, but the best solution would be to have a Mac, be able to build natively on the Mac, and then use something like Parallels or VirtualBox or something like that to be able to run Linux or Windows to do the same things for those environments.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Yep. Some recommended tools that are out there for building Electron applications. Electron Debug is a nifty tool that gives you keyboard shortcuts so that you can show the dev tools and reload a window or something like that. So if you're deploying, say, an internal application to people who work in your company and they run into an issue with your app, well, you can talk to them over Zoom and say, hey, if you just do, Command Shift I or whatever, you can pop up the dev tools and, freak them out a little bit. There's Electron Reload. So when you're developing something locally, normally you would have to, every time you make a change, you'd have to close the desktop application and relaunch it. Well, Electron Reload is kind of like your hot module type thing where it's monitoring your project files, your JavaScript and HTML and CSS, and anytime you make a change, it automatically refreshes the app so that you don't have to close it and relaunch it. And then if you're coming from a Node.js world and you're familiar with using something like Mocha for testing, Electron Mocha is a drop-in replacement for Mocha that understands the different environments, the main process, the renderer, and be able to test the Electron APIs, get everything under tested so that it understands how to execute those tests. There's also a built-in, or not built-in, but there's also some tools that the Electron project provides. One of those is Devtron, and that gives you some inspection tools in the Chrome DevTools so that you can look at your application while it's running, be able to see the events for the IPC type communications, and give you some hints on whether you're doing the right things or not as far as like linting goes. And then they also have a UI testing framework called Spectron so that you can test different parts of your Electron application. And it uses Chrome driver and WebDriver IO, I believe, to provide this capability. When creating Electron applications, there are a number of boilerplate projects out there. My recommendation is that if you're going to play around with Electron, that you start by building a pure Electron application without using any boilerplates. And the reason that I recommend doing that is when I first started building Electron apps, I was trying to use one of these boilerplates. And I started running into problems, and I didn't know if it was Electron that I didn't understand, or if it was the boilerplate and what it was doing that I didn't understand. But it was a little bit of frustration there. And when I went back and I redid what I was trying to do, just using pure Electron, then I could appreciate what the boilerplate code was doing for me. And I was comfortable from that point forward using one of the boilerplate projects because I knew what Electron was doing and what the boilerplate was doing. But there are a number of really great boilerplate projects out there. One is Electron Forge IO, where you can kind of scaffold an application straight from the command line, and it sets up all kinds of really cool and awesome features for you out of the box. There's the standard Electron boilerplate that's kind of UI agnostic, so that you can pick and choose what kind of front-end framework you want to use. And then there's specific ones to React and Angular and Vue, and there's a bunch of other ones, and they're all pretty well maintained as far as I can tell. There's a lot of projects out there that are depending on these, and they keep them up to date. A few quick tips on using Electron. One is, at least on the Mac, in the browser, when you mouse over like a link or a button, it turns into like a little cartoon hand. You don't want that on a desktop app. Most people think that, or would not expect a cartoon hand in a desktop app. So set the default cursor on everything in CSS to the default cursor. Another tip is to keep Windows open. So Windows, they're instances of Chromium, so they're a little bit expensive to create and destroy. If you want to keep your application running really snappy, if you've got multiple windows involved, then just subscribe to those events, like if the user is clicking on the close button, and just intercept that to hide the window instead of allowing it to completely be destroyed. And then you can show it again later when you might need to show it again. Another thing is offload work to the main process over IPC. So you send a message from your renderer to the main, say, hey, you need to render this PDF, or you need to create this report, or you need to poll the database for changes, or poll the file system for any whatever that work may be. And that way, this is kind of like the poor man's multi-threading, so that your renderer can stay responsive and not be doing a whole lot of work that could create a perception of the application not responding. And that way, when the main process finishes doing whatever it needs to do, it can send a message back to the renderer over IPC to say, hey, the work is done, here are the results. And that's the way a lot of Electron applications are built. Local storage. So most desktop applications need a way to read and write files, at least, settings and things like that, preferences. So you can just read and write JSON files, which is really easy to do because you're running in Node.js. Pro tip is to use a library like FS Extra that has JSON extensions built right into reading and writing files. You could use something like AnyDB, which is makes a local file system kind of look like, or the AnyDB is a library that's behaves like MongoDB. So you can use it as an object storage, so you can store settings kind of like a database. And under the hood, it's using JSON files on the local system, and works really well. CouchDB is similar, but it's like a full implementation of CouchDB running locally, and it can also synchronize with CouchDB server. So in a offline synchronization scenario where you want to work on some stuff offline, you want it to be able to sync to a server later on, PouchDB can do that kind of stuff. Another common scenario people ask me about is relational databases. If you're building internal applications in a corporate environment, chances are you got to use, SQL Server or Oracle or Postgres or something like that. Well, as I've mentioned before, anything you can do with Node.js, you can do with an Electron application. So if you're using SQL Server, you can use the MS SQL library or a cool library like Squell, I guess that's how you pronounce it. If you're using Postgres, I would recommend using the new Postgres client that's named Postgres because it's got some really cool templating features built into it that makes it super easy to use. MySQL, Oracle DB, there's a ORM type library for Node called Sequelize that a lot of folks really like so that you can target lots of different relational databases that it supports. And then from here, I don't have one link that has all these on here, but if you search for Awesome Electron, you're going to land on this GitHub repository, and it's got anything and everything related to Electron at this link. There's a Pluralsight course called Electron Fundamentals. It's really good. I would say maybe at this point it's a little bit dated, but it still covers a lot of great ground when building Electron applications. There is an Electron, the documentation, I think the URL for this has changed. I need to update the slide. Sorry about that. But the Electron documentation is actually really good. There's a getting started guide, and they've got all the APIs. They've done a really good job with the documentation. And then this is another community that has been really active, but I believe now they have switched Electron over to a Discord community. And my experience in the past, I haven't been on there in a while, but there's a lot of helpful people who answer questions and help you to get going wherever you need to go. All right, one last thing. You don't need permission to be awesome. I hope that you take these things that you're learning through meetups like this one, whatever you're geeking out about at work, and you get out there and you do some amazing things. Those of us in technology, we have just a unique opportunity to impact people around us in incredible ways. For 99% of the world, being a programmer or using technology like we do as software developers, it's magic, and we can help others through the power and the skills and things that we have. So I challenge you to get out there and do some amazing things and make a positive impact on the world, your local community, your workplace, your family, and the world. Thank you. Thanks again for allowing me to be a part of this meetup, and I will, if you have any questions, be glad to answer them.
That was awesome, David. No questions yet, but we'll let them trickle in. While we let the questions trickle in, I want to go ahead and share my screen for a second and share what's coming next on the meetup calendar. So let me try to add my display as a source here for a second. And it's super huge, so let me scale it down a bit. I didn't have this pre-set up, so just bear with me for a second. That's better. All right. You can still hear me, right, David?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So up on my screen is the Tracy developer meetup site. So tracydevs.com. David did an excellent presentation on Electron. Next month in November, I think it's November. Yeah, it's November. We have Laura Marinigo, I believe that's how you say her last name, and she's going to be talking about improving progressive web application performance. So if you're in the area, if you have some time, tune in for that meetup too. It's going to be remote, just like this one, at least for the foreseeable future. We don't have a speaker for December, so if you're a regular of this group, or maybe you're new, and you have something awesome to share, I know everyone who's in the audience right now is a talented developer with something nice to share. So if you think that you might want to present at our December meeting, let's just go ahead and drop me a message. The email address is somewhere on this website. So yeah, it's on the website. Just drop me a message and I'll get you set up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We do have some questions coming in for you, David.
Okay.
So the first question is from Fred 1000 up. Do people ever make a REST API backend with Electron, or do you just call the node code directly?
Yeah, so that I was talking earlier about my assumptions when I first got into Electron was I thought there was, you had to create your own API backend and that kind of thing. You don't have to. You can call Node.js directly from your renderer code, so you can import in your own JavaScript files or whatever you need, and you can take advantage of all the built-in Node.js libraries. You can take advantage of any library that you pull in through npm, and whatever kind of back-end work that you would normally do, like behind the scenes of an Express server or something like that, you can just do that directly in your desktop code without having to make any API calls. Now, to be clear, if you need to make API calls, like to some other third-party server, or your own API server, you can do that. There's no restrictions on that as well. So you can use something like Axios, or another popular JavaScript API type client, so that you can do that too.
So the follow-up question to that one from Fred 1000 up is, so would you make like an SPA with Electron? Or
You
could you?
can, yeah, you absolutely can. So you can use Vue or Angular or React, or any framework that is doing a SPA app, where you can create your own SPA-like interface. What I have done in some of the applications is, if I'm not going to use Vue or React or Angular, then I'll just have, like, some div tags that I show and hide depending on how I want to change the current interface. So maybe the first step, maybe I'm creating a wizard, and the first step is to fill in some information. The second step is to ask some additional questions based on the first set of questions. And I don't need a SPA framework to do that. I can just start with the one div tag, and then when the user clicks the next button, hide that div tag, show the next div tag, kind of thing. So essentially you are building a single page application, but you don't have to. You can load up other HTML files when you need to, and render that stuff too.
Awesome. We have another question coming in the chat. This one's from JW Interm. So any thoughts on why Atom is generally considered as slow while Visual Studio Code is more snappy?
Well, I don't have a good answer. I just know that Visual Studio Code is awesome. I use it every day. I've always been super impressed with what Microsoft has been able to accomplish with Visual Studio Code. I never had any issues with Atom. I was on Atom for a year or so. Maybe their plugin architecture or their extensions architecture was causing some performance problems. Whatever decision Microsoft made on how they manage their resources, they did some good things. Um, Over the years, Slack has improved the way they manage resources, so it's not as slow or uh, bloated as far as memory consumption and that kind of thing goes. So you definitely can create really performant, well-designed Electron applications. Newsflash: we're developers and we're capable of really messing things up and creating bad applications. It doesn't matter what platform or language we're using, right? We can. It's easy for us to create poorly designed systems without meaning to.
The question from Fred 1000 Up is saying, how is Visual Studio Code so fast in Electron, or is Electron just usually that fast?
My experience is, if I'm building some simple applications, Electron is extremely fast. I never have to worry about doing any kind of tweaks to make Electron faster. So I think it all has to do with how well you manage any kind of resources that could be causing your system to slow down. I don't know how. I've never dug into the Visual Studio Code, so I don't know what they're doing to make it so work so well, but it works well.
Awesome. If there's any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat. Just want to put out there that this video it's being recorded, so probably tomorrow or sometime over the weekend it will be uploaded to YouTube, so that way you can see it on demand. In case you came in a little late and you wanna catch up on some of the awesomeness that appeared on the stream. Did I lose you, David? Did you just freeze?
I can hear you, but it
All right,
doesn't look like my video.
let me fix your video real quick. It's all right. It already fixed itself. I don't know. I'm gonna try something new next time on the next stream. So just still experimenting with all this stuff, but
Yeah,
your video is pretty good most of the time.
good.
Um, well, I mean, if there's here we go. Got another question. Senko Moon, I believe is the name. So what would be advice for people that want to learn something in tech, but it looks so intimidating, or are in a mood that does not allow them to learn? The sentence was a little strange. I'm not. I guess the question maybe is overall is what kind of suggestions would you give to somebody starting out?
Um, well, I mean, maybe you're already in a workplace that has certain technologies that are dictated to you, and you know, at any organization that you may work for, if you want to decide to branch out and learn some new things. So I don't know if the question is related to how do we how do you get over like not being given the time or the resources to learn new things, or if you're brand new to technology in general and want to learn. If you could
Um,
clarify, that would be great.
yeah, I'm not sure. Senko Moon, if you want to clarify, we'd be happy to answer it on the stream. So don't feel shy. I was gonna say, is there any other plugs that you want to give, David? Are you speaking at any other events that you really want to promote, or are you doing anything exciting?
Well, yeah, I am. I've got another event tomorrow. There's a brand new conference, TDevConf, which is a Tennessee-based conference that I'm speaking at tomorrow. It is free and all day from I think 8:30 Central Time to 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Um, and I've got another, more talks. If you want to find out more about me, I'm Reverent Geek everywhere on the internet. So reverentgeek.com is my website. There's an About Me page on there that has links to lots of things that that I'm up to, and things that I enjoy, and all my other social media accounts and things like that. Um, if you're interested in any of my illustrations and things like that, I've got a portfolio on my website. I also sell illustrations and stickers and T-shirts and all kinds of fun stuff. All right, so I saw the question about approach to learning and being an intimidating thing. So my encouragement to you is um, I I'm a lifelong learner. Those of us who are in technology who continue to be software developers, we we have to have a passion for learning because technology changes so rapidly and there's always new things to learn. And so um, one is there is don't be intimidated or don't feel bad that you don't already know something that other people know. Every one of us, me included, are completely new to technologies that are coming out. So I am in the same starting point that you are when it comes to, say, I want to learn about Go. I know nothing about Go, and it does seem really intimidating because there's a lot of stuff out there. To be able to use it, you have to learn it. And so the first step is to just dive in and create something. There's, you know, people who are genuine, who care about others and are respectful for others, you can share what you're doing with them, and they're going to be really encouraging, and they can help you along. And when you have a community like this Tracy Developer Meetup, I know because I used to run a community as well. There is there's so much encouragement that people, can answer questions. Don't feel afraid to ask questions. Don't feel afraid to um, dive into technologies. And but I guess it boils down to, everybody starts somewhere, and it's going to stink for a while. You're not going to be able to do all the things that you want to do at first, but the more you practice, the easier it's going to get. And before you know it, if you give yourself some time and patience, allow yourself freedom to make mistakes, you're gonna pick it up, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get going.
I absolutely agree with that. If you can find a local meetup group in your area, um, I'd actually suggest maybe a smaller meetup group in your area, so that way it's more maybe inviting. I don't know the term I'm looking for, but uh, go to these local meetups, participate, learn, network. You're gonna get where you need to be. It's just gonna take a little time. Don't let it discourage you. Fred 1000 up is saying nice good guitars. And Senko Moon is saying thank you so much. Your words are very motivating. I appreciate it. And Snake, I'm just gonna say Snake. That's exactly how I started up. Yeah, local meetup group really helped. All right, yeah. So everyone's agreeing with you. So this is good stuff. Um, so then I don't know about you. I know it's late over there in Georgia. Should we call it? It's up to
Yeah,
you,
I'm
David.
uh, I- I'm about ready to turn into a pumpkin.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate that you were on this meetup group, and like I said to everyone in the chat right now, tune in for the next one. Make tracydevs.com part of your monthly regular kind of scroll through to see what's new. And for that, everyone have a nice weekend.
All right.